Welcome to Shas Illuminated. Please enjoy the following shiur.
We are beginning tonight's shiur in Siman Tov Reish Lamed Beis. We are up to Sif Beis. It's the fifth line on page 192. The Mechaber says in Sif Beis, Avir bein b'gedola bein b'ketana shavim. As opposed to Schach Pasol, which we discussed in Sif Aleph, that by a sukkah gedola in the middle of pastels with 4 tfachim, on the side it pastels with 4 amos, but in a sukkah getana it pastels with 3 tfachim. As opposed to that, the Mechaber starts with Beis and tells us that you have a break in the sukkah of airspace, whether it's a large sukkah or it's a small sukkah, will be the same shiur to pastel. The bein be'emtza bein min atzad b'shlosha tfachim psula. Whether it's in the middle of the sukkah or on the side of the sukkah, a big sukkah, a small sukkah, it's all the same, and it will always passel with 3 tfachim. B'pachos mishlosha kshera. Less than 3 tfachim of airspace will be kosher. Not only that, u'mitzaref lahashlim hasukah. It will also contribute to finishing up the shiur of the proper size of a sukkah. Ve'ein yeshenim tachtov, but you will not be allowed to sleep underneath the airspace even if it is less than 3 tfachim. The Rambam writes, V'dafka sheholech al pnei kol hasukah. This last nakuda, that if the airspace is less than 3, you still can't sleep under it, that's specifically if that airspace goes across the whole length of the sukkah. O sheyesh bo kedei lamod bo rosho v'rubo. Or there's enough space under the airspace that a person can stand with his head, and as we'll see in the Mishabura, or the majority of his body. Aval balav hachi mutter. But if you don't have that much airspace that goes all the way across, or that has the amount that you can put your rosho or rubo underneath it, if not for that, then the airspace in the sukkah is mutter, the ha'ein sukkah she'ein ban nekavim nekavim. It's not shayach to have a schach and a sukkah that's not going to have some holes. So there has to be some leeway that if there's a small hole, it's going to be okay. That's why we're only not allowed to sit under it if there is some kind of shiur. Either it goes al pnei kol hasukah, or there is kedei lamo bo rosh v'rubo. Otherwise, a small hole will be kosher. The Ramah continues and says, "V'hodis schach pasel posel be'arba'a ve'avi b'shlosha." That which we said in Sif Aleph, that schach pasel pasels in the middle with 4 tfachim, and as we said in Sif Beis, that avir passes with 3 tfachim. Hainu davka shehifsek hasukah l'shtayim. That's only if this schach pasel, or this airspace, actually splits the sukkah into 2. V'lo nishar shiur helsher sukkah im defanos u'makom echad. And we're not left with a shiur of a kosher sukkah with walls in one place. Aval nishar shiur sukkah b'makom echad. But even after we have this schach pasel that's 4 tfachim, or we have the avir that's 3 tfachim, it's set up in such a way that we still retain a shiur sukkah in one place. Hamakom ahu kosher, that place will be kosher, and we'll see the details of this in the Mishavura. And then the Ramah ends off and says, Ve'af shemi bachutz im mechuber lo min atzodim. Not only is there one place where you'll have the 3 walls going to be kosher, but even the outside area beyond the schach pasel, beyond the avir, if it's connected on the sides, will also be kosher, and we'll see more about that in the Mishavura as well. So let's begin the Mishavura Sivkata on Yud. We said ve'ein yeshenim tachtov, even though avir passes with 3 tfachim, and less than 3 tfachim is kosher, we still said you can't sleep under it. So hada chamir avir mischach pasel besukkah ketana l'inyan yeshenim tachtov. That which airspace is more chomer than schach pasel in a small sukkah, lagabe, sleeping under it, that schach pasel is mutter and avir is aser. V'chein le'inyan sukkah gedola posel avir b'shlosha tfachim. And so too when it comes to a sukkah gedola, as we discussed, avir passes with 3 tfachim. U'schach pasel ba'arba tfachim. And schach pasel in the middle passes only with 4 tfachim. So we see that avir is more chomer. Kasav Ataz Atam Bataz explains the reason is Ba'avir Nira La'ayin Tfeya Hefsek B'schach B'mash Nira B'schach Pasel. It's more nicker, it's more recognizable when you have a break in the schach of airspace than when you have a break in the schach of schach pasel, and therefore we're more machmir lagabe these couple of dinim. Number 1, ein yeshenim tachtov, even though it's less than the shiur that will pass the sukkah by avir, and number 2, that the shiur of psul by avir is 3 tfachim, as opposed to the shiur of schach pasel in a large sukkah which is 4 tfachim. Sif Katan Yud Aleph is going on the beginning of the Ramah, that said this problem of avir less than 3 that in Yeshem Tatlav is dafka if it goes across the whole sukkah. Koya pachos mishloshet tfachim, as we've been explaining, this Ramah is going on that which the Mechaber says if it's less than 3 tfachim it will be okay. Ule'inyan shloshet tfachim mevayer lekamei. In terms of when it is 3 tfachim and it passes, that we'll explain later. Sevkatan Yud Beis, we said either it goes across the whole distance of the sukkah or it fits Rosho Virubo Baran Isha Rosho Orubo. The Ram brings down that it either fits your head or most of your body. V'chei mashma b'ritva ayin sham, and so too is mashma b'ritva ayin sham. The Mishabura continues weiter in Sevkatan Yud Gimel, where we said that which Schach Pasel passes with 4 tfachim and Avir passes with 3, that's dafka if these things are being mafsik the sukkah into 2. Rotzalom Ramit to say Shasukkah hayu lo shalosh tefanos. This sukkah had 3 walls. Uschach Pasel o ha'avir holich al pnei orka. And lengthwise, starting from the back wall, you have 3 tfachim of airspace, a 4 tfachim of Schach Pasel going lengthwise in the sukkah. V'lochein poselas kol sukkah. That's why this Chaf Pasel or Avir will pass the entire sukkah, the leko b'chol tzad el adofen amechza. By the airspace or the Chaf Pasel breaking the sukkah down the middle, from the back wall towards the opening, so now on each side you only have 1.5 walls, that's not a kosher sukkah. Sivkoton yudalad aval im nishar. But if you do retain in one section an area of schach kosher that's the proper size, what's a lomer shat pasul o ha'avir holech l'rachba, instead of going lengthwise from the middle wall down to the open side, it goes widthwise from side wall to side wall. V'nishar shir sukkah b'mokum echel atzad ofen ha'imtzai shel sukkah. And on the side of the back wall, you now have 3 walls. You still have the back wall, and you have part of each side wall, so you have 3 walls, so that part of the sukkah will be kosher. So the kotten says, kosher, the hayesh lo shalosh defanos, because you have over there 3 defanos, and assuming you have 7 tvachim by 7 tvachim with the schach kosher, before the avir, the schach pasel starts, that will be 100% fine. Avachela kachitzon sheme'iver hasheni pasel. However, the other side of the schach pasel, of the avir, that part of the sukkah will be pasel, to ha'ein lo ki'im shtei defanos. They're not connected to the back wall at all. So they only have 2 walls on the 2 sides, and that's going to be puzzle. V'im yesh pachos mi arba amos mi dofen ha'imtzoi ad stofo shel schach pasel. In the case where your sukkah is broken down the middle widthwise with schach pasel, and you have from the back wall to the schach pasel plus the schach pasel less than 4 amos, so then af chelak achitzon kosher. Then even the outer part of the sukkah beyond the schach pasel is kosher. Darin and dofen akuma ad sham. Because then we could say that the schach kosher by the back wall plus the schach pasel afterwards all together is less than 4 amos. That will all be dofen akuma, and the sukkah will be kosher beyond the schach pasel, because now you have the 2 side walls and you have the back wall through dofen akuma, and that will be okay. Avol. Im avir mafsik, but if it's not schach pasel that's being mafsik widthwise the sukkah, but rather it's airspace, pasel chelak achitza, and then the outer part is for sure pasel dahab avir leka lemeiver dofen akuma. Because when it comes to airspace, we're not able to say dofen akuma, and therefore it will be pasel. Now there's a very important point here that shiur24589siman63224 brings down, and there's also a lengthy note about it in the back of the sefer, and that is os yodalid. So we said again, if you have schach pasel that's breaking your sukkah down widthwise, so on one side you have the back wall, 2 side walls, you have a sukkah that's kosher, but beyond it you only have 2 walls that's going to be pasel. But then we said if the schach kosher by the back wall plus the schach pasel is together less than 4 amos, then you have the ofen akuma, which will be machshir, the part that's beyond the schach pasel. The shiur24589siman63224 points out in your dalad umikom makom achelek hapnimi gam kein kosher. Even though we're saying that the further part of the sukkah through dofen akuma of the back wall will be kosher, he's saying still the inner side will also be kosher. The gabi dilei lo amin and dofen akuma. So in terms of the section right next to the back wall, we won't say dofen akuma, and you have 3 walls being machshir that part of the sukkah before the schach pasel starts. But klape, the area that's beyond the schach pasel, there we will say dofen akuma in order to be machshir that part. So the shiur24589siman63224 is saying that really both are going to be okay, but really it's a tie to the sasri, because if the part by the back wall is kosher, so then we're not saying dofen akuma. And if you want to say the further part is going to be kosher, you are saying dofen akuma. Then if you're sitting in the part by the back wall, you're sitting under a wall. So really they don't work together, and therefore the note in the back of the Sefer, where everyone can be ma'ayin on their own time, at note 14, if a person wants to lie down in such a way that he's in both sections, that would really be attacked to the sasri. That would be a problem because you can't be machshir both at the same time for the same person. But Ayin Shem are discussing from Shlomo Zalman, in which case it will be considered attacked to the sasri, in which case it would not be. A very interesting discussion. But look, Abi, what we want over here in the Mishavura is that besides what the Mechaber says, that if the break in the sukkah through the schach pasel is widthwise, so the back wall and the two side walls before you get the schach pasel will be a kasher sukkah, beyond that will be pasel. The Mishabura adds on, but if it's less than 4 amos from the back wall to the end of the schach pasel, you will be able to be machshir through dofer akuma, the further part of the schach kasher, because now you have the two side walls and the back wall of dofer akuma, and the Sharatzion is just pointing out that the fact that you're being machshir, that further part will not passel the closer part, even though they really don't work together, and that's discussed in the back of the Sefer in note number 14. Let's go back to the Mishabura. Sivkoton Tes Zayin. Sivkoton Tes Zayin is going on the last point that the Ramah brought down, and that is, even in this last case, where we say you have a break widthwise, and you'll have 3 walls by the back wall, and that will be kosher, the Ramah said, "Aval in nishar shir sukkah makom echad hamakom hu kosher." That's what we discussed, and then he adds on, "V'av shemi bachutz," and even the area beyond the schach pasel or the avir could also be kosher in mechuber lo menat stodim if it connects around the sides. So says Sivkotan Tazayin, what's a lower means to say, "Pa'am mavchila kachutz shim bachutz gam kein kosher." Sometimes even the outer portion will also be kosher. Bein b'schach pasel u bein ba'avir. Whether it's a case where the sukkah is broken down in the middle with schach pasel or with avir, kigon shem mechuber menat stodim, where the schach pasel and the avir doesn't go across the whole distance of the sukkah, but there's some room of schach kosher connecting this part to that part. Then we could join together the inner part and the outer part of the schach, even though in the middle there is airspace or a schach pasel, we'll be able to join together the two schach kosher to be machshir the sukkah. Dahainu, afilu in bapnimi levad shir sukkah. Even if on the inner side, by the back wall, you do not have a shear of Helsher Sukkah, still you could join together the part that's beyond the Schach Pasel or beyond the Avir to join it together for the shear of a Kosher Sukkah. Umikol Makom also Chilek Shal Avir or Schach Pasel Ein Leishev Tata L'Kuyama, but according to everyone, you certainly would not be allowed to sit or sleep under the area of Schach Pasel or the Avir. Ubesedi B'Kur Yaakov L'Fakbek Al Zeh Shekasavnu, the Mitzar Tafnimi V'Achisam Helsher Sukkah Ayin Shal, the B'Kur Yaakov takes issue with this last point of the Ramah, that says that you could join together the inside part and the outside part, even though it's really separated by airspace or schach pasel. Look over there in the B'Kur Yaakov that he argues on the Ramah. Continues the Mechaber Vayter Siv Gimel, schach pasel pachos me'arba'a. Let's say you have schach pasel on your sukkah less than 4 tvachim, va'avir etzlo pachos mishlosha, and you have airspace right next to the schach pasel, and that airspace is less than 3 tvachim. So we know schach pasel passes with 4, avir passes with 3, so you don't have shear in each one to pasel. You have less than 4 of schach pasel, less than 3 of avir. Ein mitzarf and lifsel, says the Mechaber, they don't join together to pasel, and the sukkah is kosher. Hilkah, therefore, Im avir shlosh of makom echad. So with this will relate to the following case. Let's say you have airspace that is 3 tvachim. Afilu miato b'schach pasel kosher. Since we're not mitzaref airspace and schach pasel, if you have too much airspace that would pasel your sukkah, you could just add some schach pasel, and that will make the sukkah kosher. V'hani mili b'sukkah gedola, that's only talking about by a large sukkah. Aval b'ktana, but by a very small sukkah, she'ein ba ela shiva al shiva, which is only 7 tvachim by 7 tvachim, which we saw in the last year that's lav dafka. Im yesh ben shneim shlosha tvachim mitzaref from lifsol. If you have between the airspace and the schach pasel a shear of 3 tvachim, that would be mitzaref, and that would pasel your sukkah. Says the Mishabura Sivkotin Yuzar Schach Pasel Pachos Me'arba V'Avir Esloras. Lover means to say Afilu Hoya Schach Be'emtza Al Pnei Kol Arko. Even if the Schach Pasel is in the middle of the sukkah, along the whole length of the sukkah, Afilu Hachi Ein Mitzaref Eslo Ha'avir Lifso HaSukkah. We still will not join together with it the airspace right next to it, the Pasel of the sukkah, Mishum de Lo Shavi Shiurayu Ladodi. Since the shiurim of schach pasel and avir by a sukkah gedola are not equal. The dinom kanol b'sivim hakodma, their din, like we just discussed in the previous Sifim. The Mekom Schach Posel, in the area under the Schach Posel, Kevan de Ein Bo Arba Tfachim Mutalishon Tatov, since it does not have the shear of 4 Tfachim, one would be allowed to sleep under it, Uba Mekom HaAvir, but in the place of the Avir, after Ein Bo Shlosha Tfachim, even though it does not have 3 Tfachim, Ein Yeshen Tatov, you still can't sleep under it, Kanal Sebez. That's exactly like we just discussed in Sebez, and we have Hezbollah based on the Taz, that when it comes to airspace, it's more chumra than schach pasel, and one of those chumras was that even if you have less than a shear to pasel your sukkah, you can't sleep under the airspace, but if you have a shear less than that will pasel your sukkah by schach pasel, you still would be allowed to sit underneath it. But if it would be a small sukkah, the shom shavu shiurai l'hadadi, as we know there, the shear schach pasel and avir is the same shear to pasel, the gam schach pasel dino sham b'shlosha tfachim lepaslo, because by a small sukkah the shear schach pasel is like that of avi that has 3 tfachim to pasel, kanal b'sosef al, like we saw at the end of Sev Aleph, hilkach mitzarvim tavayu lepaslo kishiyesh ben shnei tfachim. Therefore we will join together the schach pasel and the airspace to pasel the sukkah, because whenever shiur are equal, we join them together. That's why by Yom Kippur, if a person eats 2 different foods, it will join together for the shear of Isra Achila. If a person eats and drinks, it will not be mitzarif to the shear, because the shear Achila and shear are different shear on Yom Kippur. Here also by a Sukkah Gedolah, the shear of Avir and shear of Schach Pasel to Pasel are different, so they're not mitzarif. Mashegem by Sukkah Ketana, they're both the shear of Gimel Tfachim, then they would be mitzarif to Pasel. One interesting bi'arlach over here, the second to last line on 192, Hilkachim Avir Shoshev Makom Echad, Afilu Miato. The bi'arlach is bothered by an interesting thing over here. In Siv Gimel it tells us that Schach Pasel less than 4 and Avir less than 3 next to each other don't join together. He says, therefore, if you have airspace of 3, if you put in Schach Pasel, it will be okay. So the Mechaber only discusses airspace of 3 that you want to be mafshir by putting in Schach Pasel. The same thing would be true if you have Schach Pasel that's 4 Tvachim, and you just take out some of it and leave it as Avir, that also will be okay. And the Rebbe just points out, in a Chanami, we're just choosing one case. If you look in the Rebbe he writes, Hu adin Schach Pasel ba'arba Tvachim ba'sukkah gedola, u'miato bein bekanim bein ba'avir. He says the same thing would apply if you have Schach Pasel as 4 Tvachim in a Sukkah Gedola, and then you're memaited by either taking away some of the Schach Kosher and replace Schach Pasel and replacing it with Schach Kosher, or you take away some of the Schach Pasel and you remain with Avir next to the Schach Pasel, that also will be kosher. So the Mechaber is just giving us one example in the Hilkach, that if you have airspace of more than 3, you're able to be mafshir with Schach Pasel, but if you have Schach Pasel more than 4, you're able to be mafshir by just taking it away and leaving it as airspace. Certainly if you put in Schach Kosher, that certainly would be okay as well. Continues the Mechaber in Sev Dalet, im yesh Schach Pasel shnei tvachim. If there is Schach Pasel of 2 tvachim, v'od Schach Pasel shnei tvachim, and then there's another section of Schach Pasel which is also 2 tvachim, v'avir pachos mishlosha machzik b'neihem, and there's a break of airspace less than 3 tvachim between the 2 Schach Pasels that are 2 tvachim each. Yesh lehistapik im shnei apsulim mitzarfen lisel hasukah. There is a suffix if those 2 places of Schach Pasel of 2 tvachim will join together to pasel the sukkah when there is a space of less than 3 tvachim of air in between them. Says the Mishaburus of Cutting Yotes, yesh lehistapik. V'lochein, and therefore, in efshar l'sakin yasakin, if you're able to fix up this sukkah, you should fix it up. V'im efshar l'sakin v'ein l'sukkah acheres, if you're not able to fix it up, and you have no other sukkah to go into, yeshev ba, you should sit in the sukkah, v'lo yivarach v'yushnamik v'leishev ha-sukkah, the safek brachos l'hakel, because when it comes to brachos, we always go to kula. So the safek here is, are they mitzarfim? Sit katan chav. Me, however, im ein bapsulim arba'a, if between the 2 sides of the avir and where the Schach Pasel does not add up to 4 tvachim, lo amrinan she'echoshuv kesasa machmas lavud, then we would not say that it's considered like it's closed up because of lavud, the lo amrinan lavud lahachmir, because we do not say lavud lahachmir. In other words, the suffix of the Mechaber is we have 2 tvachim on one side of the airspace, 2 tvachim on the other side of the airspace. Then he has a suffix, maybe the 2 plus 2 equals 4 will pass the sukkah. But says the Mishavura, if you have less than 2 over here, and and or less than 2 over there, where it wouldn't join together to 4, then for sure we would not consider it closed up because of lavud and to passel it. Because we don't say lavud lahachmi. If you look in the shiur24589siman63224 on Os Hazayin, he writes, the Pirish, the explanation is, Nehida amrinan she'echoshev ki'ilu shneim smuchim zelazeh. Granted, the tzad of the mechaber that maybe would passel when you have 2 tefachim on one side of the airspace and 2 tefachim on the other side of the airspace, is that through love it maybe we would view these 2 boards of 2 tefachim that are schach passel as if they join together. So granted, there's a tzad to say that mikol makom lo amrina sheim beforad v'sasim mischach passel. But one thing we will not say is that if you have 1.5 and 1.5 with less than 3 tefachim of airspace in the middle, we're not going to view them as if they remain separate, and we fill in the airspace with schach pasel to create a shiur of 4 tefachim of schach pasel. That we for sure won't do. So the Chavetz Chaim is explaining that the suffix of the mechaber is dafka we have a proper shiur of 4 tefachim of schach pasel just as a separation. So the question is, how does lavud work? Does lavud work as if we join the 2 sides together and now you have 4 tefachim? Or does lavud work that we view it as if it's filled in with something that's okay? And then you have 2 tefachim and 2 tefachim remaining separate. That's the suffix of the mechaber. But Dr. Mishavura, but if a case is less than 2 and 2, meaning you don't have a total of 4, you have, let's just say, 1.5 on one side and 2 on the other side, and less than 3 tefachim in the middle, it's a davar pashut over there that we're not going to say it's puzzle, because in order to passel over there, we have to view it as if schach puzzle fills on the airspace. There is no tzad in the world that we would view it as if schach pasel fills in the airspace. The 2 options are, view them if they're together, and if they are together, it's 3.5 tefachim of schach pasel, which will not pass to the sukkah. Or is there other material that the Lachem Hashem Sinai Ki'ilu places there, which is kosher for schach, and then certainly it wouldn't be a problem. So the only suffix of the mechaber, explains the Chavetz Chaim, is when you have between the 2 sides of the schach pasel a shiur of 4, then on the tzad that lavud says you join the 2 sides together, the sukkah will be pasel. On the tzad, that's not how lavud works, it will be kosher. But if you have less than a shiur total schach pasel of 4 tefachim, then of course it will not join together through lavud, because lavud doesn't add schach pasel to make it a shiur of 4 tefachim, and avada, that sukkah will be kosher. What I just spoke out is very much written out in note number 17, Ayin Sham. That concludes Siman Tov Reish Lamed Beis. And Mitzvah Shem, the next year we'll start the new Siman Tov Reish Lamed Gimel.
You have been listening to a shiur from shasilluminated.org. For other shiurim on many topics, or to hear an Iyun shiur on any daf in Shas, including Ma'ar Mekaymas on each shiur, please visit www.shasilluminated.org. To order CDs or for more information, please call 203-312-SHAS. That's 203-312-7427, or email info@shasilluminated.org.